Hey everyone, today I'm going to be showing you how to import and export text content from Figma using JSON files. And we're going to do this by installing a plugin called CopyDoc. So if you haven't already done so, you can go to the Figma community and search for the term CopyDoc, which is CopyDoc, and you'll see a result called CopyDoc come up under the plugins tab. And if you go over to the right hand side, you'll be able to click on the install button. And once it says installed, you can jump back into your Figma file and we can get started. So the first thing we need to do is just right click anywhere, go down to plugins and then click on CopyDoc. And that's just going to open the plugin that we just installed. Now you'll notice that there's a few different options here, but today we're just going to be looking at the options which export Figma text layers to JSON and then import the text updates to Figma from that modified JSON file. So the first thing we need to do in order to edit the content is to export the JSON from Figma. And we can do that by clicking on the Export JSON button on the right hand side here. So once that loads up, you'll see that all of our parent frames, so all of the frames at the top level of the page, will be loaded into the plugin as an option to choose which frames you actually want to export the text content from. So by default, it will automatically pre-select all of the frames, but you can easily change that by either deselecting the frames that you don't want or deselecting all the frames and checking a couple. The other way that you can do it really easily is just by selecting all the frames and then clicking on the frames individually. So by highlighting those frames, the plugin will automatically filter down just the frames that you've selected on the Figma canvas. So that's just another really quick way if you know which frames you want to export and not have to go through the list and find the checkboxes. So for today's example, I'm just going to export every single frame, and this is just to show you what it looks like with a medium-sized JSON file. So to export our Figma text content to JSON, we can just click on this top right button over here, which is Export JSON. So I'm going to click that now, and this is going to export all of the text content currently on our page to a JSON file. So now that the Figma text layers are ready to download, I'm going to click on the Download Text button, and I'm going to save the zip file to my desktop. And if I double click on the zip file and open up the folder, you'll see that we've got our JSON file that's been saved out, and we also have a folder called Frames, and that Frames folder has been included because I opted into the Design References checkbox that was in the plugin a moment ago. So if I look at those images, the plugin has basically saved out PNG files of every single frame that I decided to export, and this is just a really nice way to have a visual reference of the text content in the JSON file that we've just exported, even if you don't directly have access to the Figma file at the time. So these are just a really nice little bundle of exports that you can reference while you're making copy updates. So now that we've got our JSON file, let's go ahead and open it up in our code editor. So I'm going to use Visual Studio Code and open that up now. So I'm just going to drag the JSON file into the Visual Studio Code editor. And you can see here we've just loaded in our JSON file. So this is the Dear to Rams presentation page 1.json file. So this is all of the text content that's currently in our Figma file that we've exported to JSON using the plugin. So you can see here we've got an array of JSON objects, and each object has an ID, the frame name, and also the text string. So the ID is a field that you definitely don't want to touch. That's what helps map the content back into Figma when we re-import the JSON file in a moment. So I'll show you what that looks like very shortly. And the frame is just a reference to the frame that's being included for each of those different text layers. So that's essentially the parent frame for all of these little text strings. So you can see here it changes as we go along. And the frame can also be used as the reference, as I showed you a minute ago, in the frames folder. So if you really wanted to visually reference what was in frame 4, principle 3, you could just go into the frames folder, find number 4 and open that up, and we can see here that the text content will match up with that. So that's what that looks like there. Okay, so now that we've got our JSON file with all of our Figma text content, I'm just going to make a few updates to show you what it looks like to then re-import. So for example, if I were to change Dieter Rams to my own name in this instance, and then I change 10 principals to 2 principals for some reason, and then if I decided to do a bit of a bulk replace as well, I could do that too. So if I did a search for good design and I did a find and replace, so I can do a replace, and I'm going to replace good design with bad design. So that's just a bit of an update across the board. So if I click on replace all, that has now changed every reference of good design to now be bad design. So that's all I'm going to do for now. I'm just going to save that JSON file again. So now that I've saved the JSON file, we can go ahead and re-import that text content back into Figma from JSON. So I'm just going to minimize the file, and in my plugin, I'm just going to close off the success message. And this time, instead of clicking on the export Figma text layers to JSON, I'm going to use the import text updates to Figma from JSON option. So if you go ahead and click on the import JSON button, that's going to bring up this little prompt with a box that you can either click or drag and drop a JSON file inside. So in my case, I'm just going to drag and drop the updated JSON file that we just edited directly into that little box and drop it. And there we go. It's just read all of the text content from that JSON file. And you can see here it's detected 13 text layers that contain text updates. So on the left-hand side, we've got all of the current Figma text that's in the document. So you can see here, Dieter Rams has been crossed out, and then it's going to replace it with my name. And it's worth noting that none of these text updates have been applied yet. The plugin will always allow you to review and approve any of the text changes that are going to be included. And so you can actually opt out of any that you don't like. So for example, if I uncheck the bottom layer and I don't include that one, it's only going to actually include 12 out of those 13 changes. And if you want to verify where those are actually coming from, you can easily click on this little magnifying glass icon, and that will instantly zoom into exactly where that text is located on your Figma page. So that's just a really easy way to validate where the text is going to be updated before you decide to approve it. And you'll see here as well, there's a visual diff checker at every stage. So for each row that's been detected in the JSON file, you can see here exactly what's going to change. So instead of the word good, the D is being kept, but the first letters are being replaced with B and A to make it look like it's bad design. So that's a really easy visual cue to sort of get a sense of exactly what's going to change, again, before you decide to override those text layers in your document. So now that I'm happy with all those, I'm going to click on the update button, and I'm just going to zoom out so you can see it happen in one go. So if I zoom out and I tell CopyDoc that I want to update those layers, all I need to do now is click on the update text layers button. So I'm going to do that now. And you'll see here that it's just updated 12 Figma text layers with the content from our JSON file. And if you have a look on the actual Figma canvas itself, you can see that we've got good design being replaced with bad design all over the place. And again, even though we've updated the content, as you can see here, it's changed the icons to show little check marks, and it's got a little updated in brackets on the side here. And you'll notice that the one that we didn't select is now disabled and it hasn't been updated. So this is just confirming that those layers have been updated. And you can still click on these icons if you want to manually verify what has been changed and what it looks like. So it's very simple, and if you accidentally made a mistake, you don't have to worry. You can just click on the or use the shortcut for the undo button. So if you're on Mac, you can use Control-Z, or Windows, you can use Command-Z. And if I do that now, you can see that all of those text changes have just been undone. So that's just a really quick way of undoing all the changes if you accidentally approve something by mistake. And if you want to re-import it, you can just click on the import JSON button one more time. And I'm just going to drag that file right back in and load those layers up again. And you can see this time, again, it's just coming up with 13 out of 13. So I'm just going to approve all of them this time. And I'm going to click on Update Figma Text Layers, the button, one more time so you can see what it looks like. So if I click that, it's just updated 13 text layers in about 1 second. And you can see all of the changes have been made as we'd expect. So that's just an example of how you can really quickly export all of your Figma text content to a JSON file, edit it using a text editor or a code editor, and then re-import all of that text content back into your Figma designs in a matter of seconds. It's a very, very quick way of updating content in bulk. And if you're working with a team of developers who prefer to use a JSON format as opposed to a CSV file or something like that, there's some really neat things that they can do with JSON data. So if you are working with a development team, just get in touch with them and see what they might be able to do with making really quick edits to those JSON files. They may be able to pull content down from an API or do something really interesting to update that content, or even just use the JSON content for a completely different purpose. They may be able to integrate that content with a content management system. They may be able to integrate that Figma text into a third-party API or something like that. So there's a whole bunch of neat things that you could do with a JSON file after you've exported it from Figma. But for the purposes of managing copy or managing text from Figma using a JSON file, you've just seen the simplest version of it. You can simply just open up the JSON file that the plugin exports, update all the text layers that you need using your code editor or text editor, and saving that for re-importing into Figma from that updated JSON file. So if you've been wondering how to use JSON files to manage your Figma text content, then I hope this tutorial's been helpful for you. And thank you as always for watching. We'll be back soon with more tutorials just like this one very soon.